Our next guest thinks you should take psychedelics. Well, there is a caveat that goes along with that. But welcome, Dr. Tracy Scott, to The Truth.
Thank you for having me.
So, when you say psychedelics, you're not talking about for recreational uses.
Not exactly, no. I'm talking about right now in a truly kind of guided experience with a trained facilitator.
And why would you encourage people to do such a, well, I don't know. I'm not sure what category to place it in. It's not like society rejects it. I think society probably doesn't appreciate the benefits in certain cases. And it's probably tainted by the hippie era when people took LSD and mushrooms to get high. Is that right? Is that a fair statement?
I think it's a fair statement. I do. And I mean, I'm a true believer. I come from more of the pharmaceutical, allopathic Western medicine model myself. I have a PhD and worked in that arena for many, many years in biotechnology, and then found myself struggling with something called chronic Lyme disease. And I really, after 15 years of trying to sort of biohack my body back to wellness, I discovered psychedelics. I discovered the power of these plants. And what it did for my physical healing was incredible because it works, so much on your subconscious mind. And that's really where we trap trauma, we trap memories. And a lot of times we don't even know that we're struggling with something so deep on an emotional level. And the body does kind of keep score, like the famous book has been denoted. The body keeps score, which is this physical manifestation of illness based on our mind.
Well, it has been a subject of great interest to me.
Mm,
I've worked as a volunteer in the mental health field for 30
mm,
years.
mm,
I was on the founding board of Skyline Trail in Atlanta, which is recognized as perhaps the best treatment facility in America or the world for mood disorders,
mm.
including depression, schizophrenia, bipolar, eating disorders. We have a main campus, and then we have a young adult main campus,
Mm,
as
mm,
well as
mm,
an eating disorder dedicated campus. It's a phenomenal facility. And I would read articles like some of the ones that you just sent me about psilocybin, psilocybin.
mm.
I'm a lay person, so forgive me. And other uses like what do they call it? Molly. What is it?
MDMA.
MDMA for the
Hmm.
treatment of mood
Hmm.
disorders. And I would
Yeah.
send them to our clinical director and say, "Are you aware of this? Are we looking at it? What do you think?"
Hmm.
And it was sort of like, "Well,
Hmm.
I don't know," sort of
Hmm.
hands off. So bring us into the 21st century, would you?
Yeah, of course. Yes, now there's really decent research underway in all countries, actually. And, furthest along, I think, from a robust research standpoint, is the United States. President Trump just dumping 50 million into research and funding at a federal level. And so
Was that
MDMA,
50 or 15?
50, yeah,
50 billion?
50, 50 million, 50
Million with an
million,
M.
yeah,
Okay.
million.
That's still a good chunk of change.
Still, it's good. Yeah, it's still, we're moving in the right positive direction. MDMA for PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, and psilocybin, as you had mentioned, which are magic mushrooms for depression, LSD for generalized anxiety. They're kind of the furthest along right now, not kind of, they are with safety and efficacy. And they both have FDA, all three have FDA breakthrough therapy designation. I think what the loudest political coverage right now is around ibogaine, which is something that I work with. The full root is called Iboga, but it has like the thinnest late stage clinical data, more than MDMA and psilocybin are further along on that side. But we've got some pretty premier institutions looking at this. So Stanford and Harvard, Michigan, Johns Hopkins, Columbia, just spoke with them last week. And so all of them have actively, researching this psychedelic space.
It's a area I don't profess to have a lot of knowledge in.
Mhm.
I do understand what MDMA is, I think. Um, Magic mushrooms, I have no visibility over.
Hmm.
And then there's LSD, which is a
Hmm.
whole other type of drug that has a
Hmm.
huge stigma associated with it. But then you find out that really, really brilliant people. I think Charlton Heston, um, uh, probably Elon Musk, and certainly the founder of Apple, Steve Jobs,
Hmm.
was very public about having used LSD. And um, then there's another podcaster that I listen to, Stephen Mark Ryan, Stephen Mark Ryan from Australia, and he reports having gone to, I think, South America and taken
Hmm.
a drug that is in the mushroom family, I think, that is supposed to kind of be a breakthrough for a personal breakthrough for people to really better understand and know themselves. I can't remember what that
Hmm.
was called. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Probably ayahuasca.
That's it
Um,
exactly. And
hmm.
in there,
Hmm.
ayahuasca, waka, and then sorry, and then isn't there a more potent, or is there a less potent version of that that people experiment with?
DMT itself, which is in ayahuasca, and so people can take DMT directly. It's called the God molecule. So a lot of countries right now are, also researching these different things like LSD. I mean, Brazil, where a lot of this ayahuasca comes from, with the indigenous tribes, they have an active research program around ayahuasca in particular, and DMT.
Who-
So they've isolated the molecule.
And what country is doing that?
Brazil is doing that, just because they also have, that's the indigenous people. A lot of the tribes in Brazil use ayahuasca very commonly because that's the origin. It comes from South America and those countries like Ecuador and Brazil.
So what is it? Is it safe? I mean, when I was a kid, people were taking LSD, not my friends. I was like, in my 9, 10, 11 year age
Mhm.
period. But, Woodstock, and then following on that was the Byron Pop Festival. And
Mhm.
wasn't Timothy Leary a professor at Emory? If I got that right, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I
Maybe
think
not.
so. I'm not.
Uh, but anyway, LSD was very talked about. And
Mhm.
with every breath that was spoken about LSD, people would follow it up with, you can get a bad trip.
Yes.
That's a pretty strong deterrent in my mind to taking
Yes.
a substance. Evidently, it's like a walk through hell if you're taking a bad trip and you can't just woo yourself out of it. So, enlighten us.
Right.
What are we talking about here?
Well, these are things that, oftentimes were not regulated years ago. And that's why we're moving into research where companies are now researching this. And oftentimes they're starting to talk about taking the hallucinogenic part of it out of the molecule. So people are not having these bad trips. So plenty of companies are now researching this and how they take out the hallucinogenic piece so that the people can still get benefits from it. Um, I have mixed feelings about that because I have done so much work myself with Indigenous people over the years. I've done a lot of ethnographic research. I've gone to these countries, I've sat with Indigenous people. And I do feel like nature never makes a mistake, right? It's like we have all that we need in nature, and that's really how they see it. It's like nature is the apothecary to treat many of these things. And so if you take the spirit out of the plant, which is what a lot of companies are trying to do, then sometimes people, in my belief, don't get the full kind of spectrum healing that they really need.
So, what kind of healing are you talking about? Well, two questions. What you
Mhm.
keep talking about indigenous people. What does that mean
Yes.
exactly?
I like original people, tribes. These are indigenous tribal people, like from Africa. They hold the Iboga plant, the original people that have discovered this, and they work with it. They work with the full root, the plant itself. The Kayapo people from Brazil, they work with ayahuasca and they work with other things as well, other psychedelics. And so they use them differently than we do often. They use them more for I would say, wholeness, to get back to your true essence. They use it under ceremonial aspects and ritualistic aspects, for like for Africa. In Africa, for example, with the Iboga plant, they used it years and years, centuries ago for hunting because it has this. Part that it keeps people awake, but it also is very amplifying of all the senses, and so people used it for nighttime hunting so it would amplify their senses and they would be able to see where the animals are and hear them, and it multiplies your senses in that way. So and then they happened to discover other things about it, that it was a hallucinogenic, and they thought, oh, wait a minute, what's happening here? It's more robust than we originally thought that it was.
So that's the first I've ever heard that people would use drugs to go hunting, but that's a fascinating insight, frankly.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
does anyone ever go to Brazil to take ayahuasca and not come back, or come back in a like totally changed state, but not for the better?
I mean, I'm sure there are isolated incidences of that. That's why you have to be super careful about who you choose as a guide. And even these groups, it's very popular now. You can get online, and there's numerous places that offer this. In Brazil, you can go with the tribes, you can sit with them. They precept you, if you will. You stay 2 weeks with them.
Two
It's the same in
weeks.
Africa.
Holy cow.
Oftentimes, yeah, to get initiated, to do all of the things, to learn how to hold that plant, to learn all of the things that there are about it. Sure, it's definitely an apprenticeship of sorts. And oftentimes we, as Westerners, we get excited about going there and learning these things. And yeah, oftentimes it can be dangerous if you don't know exactly who you're sitting with.
Yeah, I'd be worried
Mhm.
about how much I had in my wallet when I went to someplace like that. Probably leave my Rolex at home, I think. But all right, so you're saying ayahuasca, DNT are more for introspection. Would that be accurate?
Yes, ayahuasca is a vine. And so the way that I describe ayahuasca is that it oftentimes takes you kind of outside of yourself. It's just the way that the vine moves. It's a feminine plant. They refer to it as Mother Aya. It comes in quite soft when she kind of wants to give you some insights. It's a little bit softer than some of the others. But oftentimes with ayahuasca, I feel that because I've sat with it and I've had a number of clients that have sat with it. Sometimes being that vine is taking you outside of yourself. And it's hard to kind of put that into practice. People see certain things and they have these incredible visions, but oftentimes it's a little bit, I would say, it's a little confusing, afterwards for people. They think, how does that really relate to my life? How do I integrate that information? So, versus the one that I hold most often, which is called Iboga, that's from Africa, that one is a root. And so it comes from the ground. It tends to be more introspective, as you just mentioned. So, it's really about the person. It gives you more of a prescriptive life review, and it's very direct. There really is no gray. It's black and white. It's like, here's where you have been, here's where you are, and here's where you're going, and here's how you course correct. Here's how you fix it. So
Does it,
it
I mean,
is
do some
very
people
direct.
freak out? I mean, does it tell you if you're a really bad person, or does it validate if you're a okay or good person?
So that's a great question. I have never been doing this for years. I've been doing this for, over a decade now. And I've never had anybody have a bad trip. What it does is it kind of gives you a unbiased view of your own life. And so it doesn't necessarily have a good or bad, it's really just not labeling things as good or bad. You just are seeing it, and you're seeing it as an unbiased viewer. And so I wouldn't say it's a bad trip, but it does tell you very directly, look, this is how your mind works, and here's how you correct it. I'll give you my own example. When I first sat with it, I was on this for like a 10-hour merry-go-round ride, and I kept seeing the same scene with the same people over and over and over again. And at one point, I had heard at like the 11th hour, Iboga came in very strongly to say, are you dizzy? Are you tired of seeing this scene? And I said, my God, yes. And he
Yeah,
said, do you want to get, yeah,
I'm
yeah, do you want to get
uncomfortable
off
just
the
hearing it.
ride? Right. It's very dizzying. And it said, do you want to get off the ride? And I said, yes. How? Okay, now let us drive, now sit back, relax, surrender, and let us do the work because we're showing you how your mind has been working for the last, 35 years. And it perseverates. It's like people often fixate on things over and over and over. And so that was that perseveration. And it was giving me a very strong visual, kind of uncomfortable, right? I mean, not horrible, but uncomfortable to the point of like, oh my gosh, I see it. I see it very strongly. Now I'm actually
Yeah.
feeling
I
it.
mean, I
Mhm.
always thought what you're describing is what happens when you go to meet St. Peter. And I've been kind of, you know,
Mhm.
a little anxious about what St. Peter would say to me when I saw him. But
Mhm.
maybe the benefit is that you can do that while on earth and have time to course
Yes.
correct and have a
Yes.
better chance of entering the pearly gates. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, for
Is it
sure.
that sort of a
Because
religious experience that I'm
yeah,
describing?
it can be. People see God oftentimes. People commune with Him. We're Jesus. Different. Saint Michael a lot. Archangel Michael. So yeah, it can be. It can be a very religious experience. It depends on obviously the set and the setting and who's holding the space for you, who's facilitating. I think that makes a big difference in the experience for people. But yes,
So was that another person or was that your own brain asking if you wanted to get off the merry-go-round? I wasn't clear on
it
that.
was my own brain. I mean, it's so mysterious how these plants work. They're such master educators. And it's pretty interesting because as I mentioned, Iboga being from equatorial Africa, it has this, and I've been many times, the tribe, the indigenous people wear a certain color. Red and black and white is it's very symbolic there, especially in the ceremonies. And you see certain musical instruments that they play. And I have clients that have never having been to Africa or seen any of that will take a boga and see that entire scene perfectly. They'll describe the instruments, they'll describe what they're wearing. And so you think, how is that possible? I do really believe that it's almost like the DNA of the plant itself that holds this kind of rich tradition, and it's giving it to us.
That is amazing. I will have sometimes dreams,
Hmm.
and they can be both pleasant and they can also be kind of
Mm.
uneasy or n- not nightmares, but just stuff that you'd rather have the more enjoyable dream. But I'll wake up
Mhm.
and I'll be able to remember the dream, and the I'll reflect on it. The first question that invariably pops into my mind is that came from my brain. I've
Mm.
never consciously had that thought before. It's pretty
Mhm.
cool that my brain was able to
Mhm.
depict this, but how? I mean,
Yeah.
how did my brain manufacture that scene or that thought? And
Mhm.
it really is very puzzling to me. And so
Right.
what you're describing is sort of, I feel like a pathway into that question. And I can see how that would be an adventure.
Mhm.
But with every adventure come risk. And I just
Mm.
don't want to meet a group of wild engines on the train running down the track and get robbed or worse.
Well, and I think this is why, honestly, it's important to do these things with true intention, and a good facilitator helps you write down what do you want to gain out of this experience? What are the intentions going in so that it doesn't take you on Toad's wild ride, right? And that's sort of the risk or the inherent risk of doing these things on our own sometimes. And so it needs to be professionally guided. And a professional facilitator and a guide, someone like me, is able to guide the participant through these experiences so it's not taking them on some kind of, other road.
Right. So
Mhm,
Iboga, ayahuasca, DMT,
mhm,
these are not
mhm.
substances that someone would take before they go out to the club.
Oh gosh, no, absolutely not. No.
Yet
Mm-mm.
MDA and LSD are things that young people, I'm told, sometimes will take and then go
Yes.
out to the club.
Yes, yes, they do. MDMA and LSD more synthetic, so they're not plants. They're not plant derived. And yeah, you mentioned MDMA, Molly before, and so people do take those things before they go out to the club. And the risk right now is that they're laced with other things often. So we don't know. When young people buy those things on the street, we don't know what they're mixed with. We really don't. It's probably not pure like it was in the 70s or the 60s. That's the intrinsic risk with all of this. And we do see more addiction from things like kratom and all of those things where people are becoming more addicted to things they buy on the street. So that's not good. And that's where these plants are very powerful, especially iboga, ibogaine. It's a very powerful addiction interrupter.
Okay, so we've been talking about some of the clinical benefits of, forgive me, Iboga,
Mhm,
ayahuasca, DMT. Are there
mhm.
pleasurable effects that go along with it? Or is it strictly for therapeutical purposes? We'll get right back to the show after this brief word from our sponsor, Masculine Man Essentials. Look, most deodorants on the shelf are full of aluminum, parabens, and synthetic junk. Masculine Man Essentials goes at it differently. All natural ingredients, built for men, and it actually holds up through the whole day long. Whether you're at the office, at the gym, in traffic, or just getting home for the night, try Masculine Man Essentials. I've been using it, and I can tell you, it's the real deal. Head to masculinemanessentials.com, grab yourself a 2-pack or a 4-pack, use the promo code TRUTH at the checkout to save on your first order, and the link is in today's show notes. As you know, we don't put our name on anything that we haven't tried and believe in. So when I tell you about Nessa's Hemp, I want you to listen up. Nessa's Hemp is a Chicago based company that makes hemp, and it was founded by Anessa. And what she's built is really something. We're talking about clean, high quality hemp products with no gimmicks, just real ingredients, real transparency with real results. Whether you're dealing with stress, sleep issues, inflammation, or you just want to add something natural to your wellness routine, Nessa's Hemp has something to offer you. Head over to nessahemp.com, that's NESAS hemp.com, and check out what they've got. Use our promo code TRUTH for a discount just by being our listener.
No, there are pleasurable effects from it. I mean, many people see incredible, beautiful visions. It's everything is really heightened, and so a lot of your senses, as I mentioned before, are heightened. People see memories from the past that are beautiful, people that have maybe crossed over to the other side that come through, ancestors, people that possibly are your grandparents, or if parents have passed away, they often have messages for us. So, yeah, no, it can be very
Oh my
beautiful.
gosh. You're
Mm.
saying it's like a seance that I could actually, can you converse with the departed,
Yes,
or is it
often,
a
yes.
one-way conversation?
Yes, oftentimes, yes, they can. They have messages for us, and that,
Could I
it's
reconnect with my parents?
possibly, if it's meant to happen. It usually does in these types of ceremonies, honestly, and if it's guided and you have the intention, oftentimes, as I mentioned, you have to go in with the right intentions. And so if you go in with the right intentions and that's what you're seeking, we often can ask these plants to show us these things. And it's not always a guarantee, but oftentimes it does happen.
So I had a fair amount of tension with my brother.
Mm,
If I and I mean he would have his side of the story. I have mine.
mhm,
My paradigm is that for 70 years well, not 70, for 60, until I got my nose bloodied again and I said forget it. But every time I tried to build a bridge, he would tear it down.
Mm.
Um, am I going to reconnect with him?
It is variable. It's really hard to say, but if there's healing to be done still in your subconscious mind, more than likely. And it's not unpleasant because when you think about things that have sometimes we talk about past things from childhood, growing up, even things in our inside our mother's wombs as traumas. And these plant medicines, oftentimes brings us back to those times where we have maybe arrested development. You know, it's like something within us has occurred that has arrested our growth, our emotional growth. And these plants bring us back to those moments to sort of have a redo, is to tell the story differently. Because I can't tell you how many clients come to me with stories like that, and it sets them up for patterns in adulthood. Maybe something
Hmm.
about abandonment or I'm not worthy. And there's been an example, there's been a situation around that. And so these plants take us back to those moments so that we can tell that story differently. And it's cataloged differently in our minds.
Well, that example really has been a challenge for me in my life
Mm.
because it does seep into my daily psyche. If I can't get along with my own brother, what makes me think I can get along with anybody else, for crying out loud? But then I intellectualize it and I say, look, I did my best, you know?
Mhm.
So anyway, I guess you weren't planning on a therapy session, but I appreciate your listening.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it is very common. I'll give you an example. I had a client here a year ago, a Jewish man, and he, remembered this time that he was going to his bat mitzvah. Well, his parents forgot his. He had the same ceremony, the same kind of party as his brother, but they didn't have a cake for him. They had a cake for the brother, and they made a big deal about the brother, but not him. And as small as that seemed at the time, I can't remember the exact age that there is a bat mitzvah. Is it a bat mitzvah or a bar mitzvah? I'm sorry, I don't quite know. I think it's bat. But yeah, I think that it's like maybe 15, something like that. But that set him up for a world of different types of things in his adulthood. It was like every relationship he got in, he felt unworthy. He felt unseen. And we had to, we went back into that scenario in the guided experience and we told that story differently. It was like, okay, you walk in a room, now you're walking into the ceremony room to the big, party, and there's two cakes. Everyone's now cheering for you, not just your brother. And so that really made a huge difference. As small as it seems, it was cataloged in his mind that he was not worthy.
Well, I can really I can feel that as you're
Um,
describing it. That would be very hurtful,
mhm.
and just not to belabor this subject, but my mom, who I loved, um, she had her shortcomings.
Mhm.
One of them is she did play favorites between me and my brother. The
Mhm.
problem for my brother was, and for me at the time it wasn't, but I was her favorite. And
Mm.
so that created tremendous resentment, I think, between my brother and I. And I'm sorry for that. But I do think that she was really at fault for doing that. I always bent over backwards as a result of that to treat all of my children the same.
Yeah.
And in every context that you can think of, I tried to do that, and so did my wife. And we
Mhm.
consciously discussed it to elevate each of our boys and not slight them.
Mhm.
Even though our middle son says at every opportunity that he's the forgotten middle son, which I think is just pure manipulation because if we favored anybody, it's been him.
Oh, yeah, I have one of those as well.
So give us the hierarchy between Iboga.
Mhm.
Again, pronounce it for me again.
Iboga.
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 So the emphasis on the second syllable.
And
Ayahuasca and DNT. What are the gradations?
DMT, right? So I
DMT?
DMT, yes, it's an M, like I getting married,
Like Mary.
right?
Okay. Oh, I had it wrong.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I am somewhat biased, but they do dub Iboga as the Mount Everest of all plants, of the plant kingdom, of the psychedelic world. And it's just because it is so powerful. It is such a powerful healer of trauma, mostly, addiction, yes, trauma, PTSD, gosh, anxiety, depression. It does so many different things in the brain. It works on so many different receptors at the same time that's what makes it so powerful. And people have these just incredible stories of just recovery, in every sense of the word. So it's pretty exciting. I love the efficacy of that plant. That's why I work with it.
This idea just popped into my brain. Do you mind if I ask Grok to evaluate these
Sure,
substances?
go for it.
Hi, Aura. I'm looking into the substances known as Iboga, ayahuasca, and DMT. Can you evaluate these substances both from the upside and the potential downside and risk of them? What do you think?
These three are very different substances, despite overlapping psychedelic effects. Ibogaine, stands apart with serious cardiac risks, while ayahuasca and pure DMT have much better safety profiles in controlled settings. Ibogaine, upsides. Strongest evidence for treating opioid addiction, it can dramatically suppress withdrawal symptoms within hours and reduce cravings for weeks to months in observational studies. Some data also show benefits for PTSD, depression, and anxiety, especially in veterans. One study of special operations vets found high remission rates for PTSD, depression, and anxiety after a single dose. Downsides and risks. This one carries real danger. It prolongs the QT interval, raising the risk of dangerous heart arrhythmias like torsades de pointes. There are around 30 to 33 documented deaths linked to ibogaine, often involving pre-existing heart issues, electrolyte problems, or mixing with other drugs like opioids. Other side effects include nausea, ataxia, loss of coordination, tremors, and occasional mania or psychosis. It's not something to experiment with casually. Medical screening and monitoring, ECG, electrolytes are essential. It's illegal in the US, Schedule I, and best avoided outside highly supervised clinical settings. Ayahuasca upsides. Solid evidence for rapid antidepressant effects in treatment resistant depression, with some randomized trials showing significant symptom reduction lasting at least a week after one dose. It also shows promise for anxiety, addiction, and emotional processing. The brew, DMT plus MAOIs from Banisteriopsis Ka often leads to profound personal insights in ceremonial or therapeutic contexts. Long-term traditional users don't show cognitive deficits and often report better mental health. Downsides and risks, mainly acute nausea and vomiting, the purge, which many see as part of the healing. Transient increases in heart rate and blood pressure occur, but serious adverse events are rare in healthy people in controlled settings. Rare prolonged psychotic reactions can happen, especially in those with personal or family history of psychosis or bipolar. Avoid if on SSRIs or other serotonergic drugs due to serotonin syndrome risk. Overall, it's considered physiologically safe in screened adults. DMT upsides. Pure DMT, smoked, vaped, or IV, is being studied for depression with very rapid effects. Some trials show strong reductions in symptoms within a day, with response rates around 60 to 80% in small studies and remission in over half at 3 months in one recent trial. The experience is extremely intense but short, 5 to 15 minutes when vaped, smoked, longer when infused. It may promote neuroplasticity and emotional breakthroughs similar to other classic psychedelics. Downsides and risks, very intense psychological effects that can be overwhelming. Panic or challenging trips are possible. Physically, it causes a sharp spike in heart rate and blood pressure during the acute phase. When taken alone, without MAOIs, it lacks the vomiting common to ayahuasca. Low addiction potential and serious adverse events are rare in clinical trials. My take. Ayahuasca and DMT look like promising tools for depression and personal growth with manageable risks in proper settings. Ibogaine is in a different category, potentially game-changing for stubborn opioid addiction, but the cardiac risk makes it high stakes. None of these are magic bullets or risk-free, and the therapeutic benefits seem heavily tied to setting, and integration support afterward. The evidence is still mostly early stage, small trials, observational data, so we're not at standard treatment yet. If you're considering any of these, get a full medical workup, especially heart screening for Ibogaine, and only work with reputable, medically supervised providers. Self-experimentation, especially with Iboga, is a bad idea. What specifically draws you to these? Addiction, depression, or curiosity about the experiences?
Just this nice lady that came on our podcast and has been telling us about it. Thank you very much, Aura.
Mm.
I mean, I
It's
think that what Aura said is actually very consistent with what you told us.
Yeah, I think
And
it's a little deceiving. It's a little disappointing. They have to err on the side of caution, obviously. But for me, and I have a medical background. I was a nurse anesthetist and intensive care unit nurse, and I also have a PhD and have been working with these plants for a long time. To me, Ibogaine has the most potential, and there is a difference. Ibogaine is in a clinical setting where you have to be monitored. Obviously, we give magnesium to protect the heart, so we know these things. We have safety protocols. This isn't something somebody would do on their own. I do more of the full route, again, the Iboga for psychospiritual benefits and all kinds of other things as well. So yeah, I feel like, each one of them has their own benefit, if you will. And again, safety is a big deal. Harm reduction is something that we, as skilled facilitators, need to pay attention to.
well, I think you were clear about that
Hmm.
even before we asked Grok.
Hmm.
You said that having a qualified mentor or
Yeah.
whatever you call it was very important. And um, you did explain that there are some medical risks,
Yeah.
so that you have to be a person that is deemed suitable for it. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't think you'd want to have somebody that had a known heart
Of course
condition
not. No,
take Iboga. So
sure.
I didn't find a lot of conflict, but um, Aura said that it was really significant in terms of helping people get off opioid addiction.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I
Hmm.
feel like in that case, it would be worth the risk. Is it a cure or a Band-Aid in those cases? Is it lasting?
Yeah, we don't have longitudinal data, which means that, we don't have a lot of long-term data looking out. But the data that we do have is extremely rich in that, yes, it's curative. It's, listen, it's hard to get statistics on this stuff again, because we don't have longitudinal data, but it's certainly not a Band-Aid. It's certainly not that. And it does depend greatly, as she said, Grog said, on integration. And so we can do all this amazing work and interrupt those pathways in the brain, those opioid pathways, and all of the dopaminergic pathways that are the reward center, which is what Ibogaine or Iboga works on. But if people don't integrate properly, integration means continuing with therapy. How do these insights and how do these things take shape in your brain and what you do after with it? So oftentimes, if we talk about addicts, going back to a setting that they don't have support, and that they may be around people that are users, that's not integration. That's not good integration. So we're looking at long-term solutions for those people. In fact, here in Costa Rica, I have a project called Garden of Divine, the God Project, and that's specifically for integration. It's a place in nature where we have different healing modalities for people who come out of these experiences, and then they go for 6 weeks perhaps or longer to integrate, because a lot of that is teaching them, the tools, taking what they learned from the ceremony and being able to integrate and embody that. How are they actually putting it into practice before they go back to their lives, in the 3D matrix. So that's important to teach people these skills.
Well, did I hear Grok correctly saying that ayahuasca could have short-term effect on people with depression, but
Mhm.
that it wore off after a week? Is that what I heard, or
It
did I
typically,
misunderstand?
yeah, typically it's not as long lasting. And that's why oftentimes you'll see people, it does increase the serotonin in your brain. All of these things do, right? They increase their
Hmm.
adrenergic receptors and all of it, the pathways rather. And so people do, they feel good for a couple weeks and then they kind of go back down to baseline. And so oftentimes you'll hear people kind of revisiting ayahuasca, or they have to revisit or microdose the psilocybin. There has to be some, maintenance to it, which I don't always agree with. Again, they're not coupling it really with integration. And so that's continued, different types of modalities, whether that be talking to an integration coach or therapist, or continuing to work in conjunction with somebody who's an integration specialist. That's what keeps those results longer lasting.
So what's your insight? And we brushed on LSD and um, uh, MDMA.
Yeah.
I had an interview with Dr. Carol Lieberman, and I asked her
Mm,
about these
mm,
substances. She's considerably older than you,
mm.
closer to my age, and I was really surprised. I was caught off guard
Yeah.
that she said she had actually in 2000 gone to Peru
Mhm.
and actually taken, was it Ibogada or ayahuasca, Anthony?
Probably ayahuasca. Yeah.
Ayahuasca.
Peru. Yeah.
Um, she said she was glad that she did it, but she probably wouldn't do it again. So
Mm,
I didn't, we kind of ran out of time and I didn't really
mm,
have a chance to go deeper
mm,
into it with her, but I intend to.
mm.
What's your take on that?
Well, I think it depends if they're de novo. In the research world, we say de novo. That's term is like, have they done it for the first time? Is that a first time experience? And so oftentimes when you're in these places like where indigenous tribes live, in the jungles of Africa or the jungles of South America, to have an experience like that, it can be challenging. It's tough, right? You've got mosquitoes and you've got, it's hot and it's just,
So bring repellent with you is what
yeah,
you're saying.
it's not pleasant. The just the environment itself is oftentimes not pleasant. They're
Huh.
definitely not as nurturing as someone like me would be, right? To do things in comfort, I think for the first time for those de novo people it's very important. I always tell people that when they say, I want to try Iboga in Africa, I want to go to Gabon, and it's my prerequisite is come here first, do this experience, have it be in a nice setting and somewhere that you're comfortable physically, and then you can go and do it in the jungles of wherever.
So, what do you do for 6 days? Do you spend the first 2 days talking about issues that you're dealing with, perhaps,
I-
and so to give you insight while they're in the Ibogada, I,
Iboga,
Ib-
Iboga.
Iboga. I'm going to get this right before we're done. Iboga. What do you call it? Trance experience
Journey, journey.
mode, huh?
Journey
Journey. Okay.
experience, right? Yeah, journey.
Iboga journey. I'm getting the lingo.
You're getting it. You're getting it
So
down.
for six
Yeah.
days, what
Well,
would one do?
typically what I do, because I have a PhD in the gut biome and nutritional sciences, I like to look at people's microbiome of their gut. I like to look at their amino acids in their brain that are called neurotransmitters. Those two things go together. It's called the gut brain axis. And I like to see people's baseline. I like to see where their serotonin is, what their dopamine is, how are they sleeping? That's GABA. That's like nature's Valium, if you will. And so oftentimes people, because of diets, because of soil, because of an inflamed gut, they aren't making serotonin, for example. And so I need to see that before they even come to me, and I do a personalized protocol based on those results. And that helps to extend the good feelings that people get afterwards, like we talked about, the serotonin and the dopamine. And so I like to optimize people. So I'll start talking to them before they arrive. I'll get a medical history. I need to know what currently they're taking, what other maybe psych disorders they've been diagnosed with, because often those are contraindicated for any of these psychedelics. And then they arrive and we start to go over intentions. What do you want to gain out of the experience? The next day is the journey itself. We start, with Iboga, it's a long half life, it's a longer journey, it lasts longer than the others. And so we start about dusk, about 6 or 7. And then I'm awake all night with somebody, professionally guiding them. And in the morning, when the sun comes up, is when they go back to their sort of sleeping space. And that's the day that I call the day of magic. magic. It's when all of those new neuronal pathways start to take shape in the brain. So we kind of limit, inputs from that day. We don't allow them to have phones or any kind of electronics. We want to kind of, put off any outside influences. And they have a journal, and they're still getting a lot of reflections that day. They're getting a lot of downloads, is what we call it. And then the following day, their body starts to come back online. They're starting to feel like, okay, I can get up, I can walk, I can walk straight. I'm hungry, my gut's starting to come back online. And that's when the clinical psychologist that's on my team comes in and starts to work with them on what I mentioned, integration. And so she also customizes personalized programs for people depending on what they're struggling with, what kind of trauma they may have. And then she'll devise a personalized program for them with a lot of the therapies. And so it might look like internal family systems or family constellations or eye movement desensitization therapies, EMDR. It just really depends on the person. And yeah, then on the last day, we try to do something fun. We try to do an outing, a lot of times it's a hike to the waterfalls, water is important, or a gentle horseback ride, things like that. And then they go home, and we continue with the support after they go back home.
That is a really interesting concept. Now, so in this 6 days,
Mhm.
you're going to provide room, uh,
Yeah.
board,
Hmm.
yourself,
Hmm.
a shrink, and a tour guide. Whew, all of a sudden it's starting to sound expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, private
Is it?
chef. Yeah, we have a chef here.
Private
Chef
chef?
is here. Yeah, the chef is here based on people's dietary guidelines and needs. Some people can't have gluten or dairy. Listen, I mean, these things are not cheap for sure. I think we're in the ballpark of what others charge for these types of experiences. We do have a sort of pay it forward program. There's so many people that it shouldn't just be for, the wealthy or the people that can afford it. I believe in that. And so we do have a scholarship program that if somebody qualifies, we'll bring them in for usually like less than 50% of the price. And we try to do those, I at least 4 or 5 times a year, we do those types of weeks.
So what do you come by yourself in pairs, groups? Are you by yourself? Are you with a group? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I got the message. This might sound woohoo to you, but during my initiation in Africa, I got the message very loudly from the plant itself is to work more with smaller groups of people. This is a
Mhm.
very intense experience, and a lot of others I know do, 6, 8, 10, 11 at a time. And I feel that it's very quintessential to the work because it is so deep. It's about you, it's about the person. It's so, personal. And so I really don't work with more than 3 people at a time. People have to, they come, and typically they'll want to come with a spouse or someone that they're close to and their family. I usually don't recommend that. Honestly, we've done it a few times where we stagger people. So maybe the husband comes first, has his journey, and then, the wife comes in on kind of the back end of his. It's not ideal just because you don't know what's going to come up in those types of experiences. Those are things that are in our subconscious mind. And oftentimes
Well, that
when we've allowed those,
I was going to ask
yeah,
you. I mean, while you're under the
yeah.
influence of Iboga, are you going to say stuff you wish you hadn't
Well,
revealed?
you're really just so deep in your own experience. You're really sort of just zoned in on yourself. You really drown out other things that are alongside of you or in the room. But there's just sometimes just things, emotions come up that people feel. It's like, oh, they maybe are unbeknownst to them once they get there. And then in the ceremony, things may come up that maybe there's conflict. Maybe there's something in the person's emotional field that's like, gosh, I don't know. I'm struggling with whatever with this partner. And then it makes it harder for the person to focus on themselves. That's the big thing. It's like
Hmm.
this is a very personalized journey. So it's not about the other
So do
person.
people break down? Do they
Sometimes, or
either have
yeah,
fits of laughter
yes.
or fits of sorrow
Yes,
and
of
cry?
course. Yeah. All of that is part of the purge. Purging is, we think of it as vomiting, but a purge can be a laugh, a purge can be a cry, a purge can be many things. And oftentimes when couples come together, especially if they're close, if one is purging or having something happen on the side, especially the purge, when someone's vomiting, the other maybe goes, oh gosh, are they okay? And it kind of
Mhm.
takes them out of their own experience a little bit.
That's amazing. That is,
Mm.
it's intriguing. Now, you kind of dodged my question there,
Yeah.
Doc. So what do others charge for this?
Okay.
I'll ask it that
Well,
way.
the range is about I think 6,000 up to for private ceremonies 12,000. There's quite a bit of a range there. And so, I charge for private on the higher side. We have payment plans, obviously. And then if I can put two people together, it's more around the $9,000 mark. If I have two people together or three people together, it becomes a little bit less expensive. But again, it includes those testing, it includes the testing that I do, it includes all the other things. They just have to get their flights. And yeah, and so that's kind of the
That
average.
doesn't strike
Mhm.
me as terribly extravagant or unreasonable
Mhm.
because you are delivering a lot of personal
Yeah.
time, attention, and medical um, reports. So,
Mhm.
um, can you tell us both? Let's start with the worst. What anecdotally,
Mhm.
what's the worst thing that's ever happened to somebody while they're under your care
Oh, goodness.
or under your spell?
I really, I have not had nobody's had a bad trip. Everybody that comes says they feel so held here, It's just even the space. This space, this house was actually originally built by Linda Carter, the original Wonder Woman. And I just, she built it for her own healing, actually. She had some addictions herself and built it for her own healing and refuge. I just think it's the land that holds people, not just us as humans, but they feel very nourished. I'll be honest with you. I had one experience where I went with somebody else that did Ibogaine to Mexico. And they wanted me to come along because we had a relationship and they knew me and they trusted me, and they had a bad trip on the Ibogaine. Now, I mentioned earlier that the Ibogaine is one of those alkaloids of the whole root. So they extract it, they concentrate it, they mix it with HCl, and they give it. It can be more intense than Iboga. It comes on more like, a freight train in a way. And he had a bad experience from the standpoint of he saw what he described as like demons. He kept kind of shouting out like, I see
Hmm.
demons, I see demons. And we were able to obviously be there to hold him in that moment, in those moments, and he felt safer. But I also know that there have been people that have taken Ibogaine and then they come to me for the full root experience, or they go somewhere else for the full root experience, and they say it feels quite different. It feels more slow, more gradual, more softer. It's a softer experience versus the Ibogaine. The Ibogaine tends to feel more fragmented. When you extract something and it's an
Okay.
isolate or it's just one of the alkaloids or the metabolite of that, then yeah, it's not gonna, you don't get the full entourage effect like you would with the full plant, the full root.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So we really like to extract the truth, and I really appreciate your
Yeah.
candor on the negative
Mhm.
uh, uh, story.
Yeah.
Anecdotally, what's your most positive outcome or
Mhm.
groups class of
Oh
outcomes?
gosh, I just had one yesterday. A past client was helping with some website stuff because he's a tech guy. He just texted me, I'm on my phone, or I would show you, but the gist of it was, before I came to you, my whole life was in shambles. I did not know how to pick myself up or how I was going to move forward with my life. And he was a married guy with kids. And he said, I felt so held by the team at Revela that my whole entire life has changed. It's like
Wow.
unrecognizable. Yeah. So I mean it's pretty typical, I have to say.
Well, I think you can pat yourself on the back for that one.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate your coming on and speaking to us. You seem incredibly transparent and
Thank
candid,
you.
which I very much appreciate. I don't feel like you've tried to snow us or pull the wool over our eyes. I think you've given us a very balanced insight into this whole thing. It is absolutely fascinating. I will speak to my wife and see if I can maybe summon the courage to sign
Come on
up.
down.
Anthony says we should do a podcast on it. If I participate, that we
Yes.
should film it all. I can just tell you that is not going to happen. It would be interesting, but if I do summon the courage and I collect some
Yeah.
data that convinces me that I might benefit from it, I'll consider it. But it really is fascinating. Dr. Tracy Scott coming to us from Costa Rica today. And thank you. And I hope you'll come back again very soon.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you very much.